So Rashard Higgins just signed a new one-year deal with the Cleveland Browns, and David Njoku also got his 5th year extended. So it's safe to say that those two players whose future with this club was in limbo is going to be certain at least until the Browns cut down to the 53-man roster. Then anything is on the table at that point. But for the time being, they have a future with the Cleveland Browns, at least with this year. But the real question about these two isn't about if they have an immediate future with the Browns. It's how bright is the possibility of their future is with the Browns, with both players playing positions that are surrounded, in Rashard Higgins' case, with top-tier, expensive talent. And the same thing goes with David Njoku. Neither of these guys are going to be the cream of the crop at that position group, and neither are they paid to be the cream of the crop at the position group. But these guys still are good enough to play a significant role in an offense. So what I'm going to set out to do, and the question that I'm going to set out to answer, is more than what is obvious. Obviously, these guys have an immediate future, and David Njoku is going to battle for tight end 2, and Rashard Higgins is going to battle for the slot. We know those roles at the very least. What we don't know is what those roles and what the potential for those roles look like in Kevin Stefanski's offense. So what I'm going to do is use last year's Minnesota Vikings information, stats, and tape to determine exactly where is there a role to be carved out for each player, and which guy has the brighter future in Cleveland. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, since both of these players are receivers of the football rather than runners of the football, we're going to break down the targets in last year's Minnesota offense. Now, if you look here, Stephon Diggs led the team with 94 targets. Dalvin Cook was second with 63. Adam Thielen, 48. Kyle Rudolph, 48. Irv Smith, 47. B.C. Johnson with 45. And then you got C.J. Ham here with 26. Amir Abdullah with 21. And Tyler Conklin with 10. Now, if we're going to look at this chart, we have to notice a few things. One, Adam Thielen's number is lower than what it should be because he missed 6 games this season. Also, Dalvin Cook's number is higher than it should be because of Adam Thielen's absence, because they threw a ton of slip screens last year, and I think that had to do with the offensive line and some of the limited pass blocking that they had received throughout the year. So those two anomalies set aside, also you have to consider the fact that no offensive coordinator in their right mind is not going to give OBJ and Jarvis over 90 targets plus each. I mean, we're probably going to be in 100 plus targets each. And that's not like some kind of, we got to feed their egos and make them feel better arbitrary amount of balls that you have to give. They're Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. You got to get them the ball. You got to throw it to them a substantial amount of time if you're going to use them. It would just not make sense to give them less targets than that, to have players of that caliber and not give them opportunities to make plays. It just wouldn't make sense. So that's going to obviously happen for the Cleveland Browns. So those analogs, while they make sense on some level, Stephon Diggs is kind of similar to OBJ, even though OBJ is a much more explosive athlete. Jarvis Landry is kind of similar to Adam Thielen, even though Thielen's taller and faster than Jarvis Landry, but Jarvis is better after the catch and better as a runner after he gets the ball. Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook are pretty comparable, even though you can argue that Nick Chubb's better, but then you get to Kyle Rudolph and Austin Hooper. There's really not. I think Austin Hooper's probably around that level. And then you get to, guys down the road. So while there are some intriguing kind of analogs between Cleveland and Minnesota, none of these are meant to be exact copy and paste numbers that I expect the Browns to put out this season. I think it's going to be a little bit different given the pieces that the Browns have when it comes to throwing the ball. Also, the fact that they have Baker Mayfield, the number 1 pick, there too, with Odell and Jarvis. I think they have to throw the ball more than Minnesota did with Kirk Cousins. So while these aren't meant to be exact, right? These aren't going to be exact representations of what the Browns are going to do next year. I do think there are some interesting analogs here that do exist. The tight end conversation gets even more interesting when you look at David Njoku, who a year ago seemed primed for a breakout. I mean, he was on all kind of TV shows, doing all kind of interviews, and now he is fighting for his spot on the roster. It is a stark contrast to what we thought David Njoku was going to do last year. He unfortunately got injured, then put in the doghouse by Freddie Kitchens, and then the Browns went and signed Austin Hooper, drafted another tight end. So now David Njoku has his future in question. Now, he got some of that ease by having his 5th-year extension taken, but that still doesn't dilute the fact that he is in a pretty peculiar situation for a guy with his skill set and with his specific weaknesses. Because David Njoku is a lot like the 2019 Browns, right? On paper, he's unstoppable. I mean, he can jump 7 feet in the air, clear. He's super athletic, pretty fast for a tight end, is a willing blocker on paper, and a big guy, a big body. But just like the 2019 Browns, once you start to examine that thing closely with the microscope, things start to break down. And that's the case with David Njoku. Yes, he's a physical freak. Yes, he can jump high, but he can't catch consistently. He can't block well consistently. Sometimes he's willing, sometimes he's not. Sometimes he has the dog in him, sometimes he doesn't. It's kind of always a guessing game with David Njoku. And I think that's why Kevin Stefanski made the choice to sign Austin Hooper, to not have to rely on such an important position on somebody who can be as up and down as David Njoku. He kind of reminds me a lot of Eric Ebron. And since that is the case, you have to look at the role that he's fighting for. He's fighting for tight end 2. And who had that tight end 2 role in Minnesota is Irv Smith Jr., who is kind of similar to David Njoku, a more athletic tight end. You know, he has some blocking skills, but not the greatest blocker in the world. And again, David Njoku on paper, much better than Irv Smith Jr. He's much more athletic, can jump way higher, way more explosive. Irv Smith Jr., I think, is as fast or faster than David Njoku, but David Njoku is 6'5" and 245. Oh my goodness. Like, all these things on paper make him so much better than Irv Smith. But one thing Irv Smith has over David Njoku is that he's a much more reliable catcher of the football. If you just look at their catch rates from David Njoku's full year in 2018, which is actually a good year, and then if you look at Irv Smith's, it's night and day comparing the two. And that becomes significant, especially in the case of David Njoku, who can do all these things, specifically in the red zone. And his athleticism and his size is something that should propel him, but since he can't catch reliably, it's something that does hold him back, because he can jump really high. He can do all these things, specifically in the red zone, but he has a quarterback who specifically throws bullets in the red zone specifically. Bullets that, if somebody is not reliable in their ability to catch the football, will bounce away. And then when that ball bounces off the hands of David Njoku because he couldn't catch the fastball, then chaos ensues and you end up with red zone turnovers, which you can't have. So David Njoku's greatest gift is kind of what's holding him back, just because he has those focus drops so much that you can't trust him in the red zone, specifically because Baker Mayfield's there throwing bullets. Now, could Baker throw less bullets? Yeah, but in the red zone, you got to throw bullets, or else these things are going to get tipped by a defensive lineman and get picked. So you can't really blame him as much as that. You kind of have to blame David Njoku for not being able to catch specifically bullets that Baker Mayfield throws him. But for David Njoku, Irv Smith Jr.'s stats last year in Minnesota are probably going to have to be his baseline if you add a couple of more touchdowns, because inevitably the Browns are going to want to use him at what he is built to do, which is catch balls in the red zone. He just has to get better at catching the balls and not having those focus drops that he had. Now, Rashard Higgins has a different case, and I think Rashard Higgins is probably in the best spot, because he's the best fit, because he has such a his role is carved out so clear that it's extremely straightforward for him. This is why I think he has the most potential in offense, more than David Njoku, not because he can do more, just because he's set up to do more than David Njoku can. And that is where David Njoku's projection is dependent on him improving a part of his game. Rashard Higgins is already a very good fit for what the Browns need him to do. And what the Browns need him to do is fill that role that B.C. Johnson did with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I understand B.C. Johnson's not a household name. He's a rookie out of Colorado State who had good numbers, but a lot like Rashard Higgins in 2018, if you watch the games in Minnesota, he had those catches in the right moments. He had the ability to come up right where he needed to, right when Kirk Cousins needed him. He was kind of that safety blanket for Kirk Cousins, and that made him very valuable. Even when guys went down, he retained that value. He was there when they needed him. So his production might not look crazy, but it's so valuable and so memorable. That's part of what Rashard Higgins is all about. He might only get 500 yards max, but it's going to be like the most important fight. Like, he just has a knack for getting very important yards when you need him to get them. Because, yes, the way this is set up is that Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham are going to get an overwhelming amount of the touchdowns and the deep throws in this offense. Then you're going to get Austin Hooper, who's going to get those seam throws, those 20-yard chunks. And then you're going to need somebody to be the safety blanket, to be the third guy, to be, when you're in the 3rd and 10 and you got to go in a shotgun formation, you can't have all those tight ends on the field, somebody you can rely on. That's Rashard Higgins. He might not get a ton of snaps. He might not get a ton of targets. I mean, he's probably going to get those 45 targets if he makes a team and gets the spot. But he's able to make use of those targets very well. And that is the role that B.C. Johnson played. I mean, like, literally, Rashard Higgins and B.C. Johnson might be the same person because they're both 6 foot plus wide receivers from Colorado State who got drafted in the late round. Both have their strengths in the same areas. Both had their weaknesses in the same areas. Both good improvisers with good hands who are reliably safety blankets, but not guys who are going to take a top off of defense by any means. Not guys who are tremendously fast, but both somehow find a way to make their modest production much more impactful than the stats suggest. And that's what Rashard Higgins is all about, and that's what he's set up to do. So him signing this one-year deal was very calculated, and I think it's going to work out for him very well. David Njoku on a 5th-year option, got some question marks about if he can ultimately make the team, if he's going to fit at tight end too, if he's going to improve in the areas that he needs to. But if he does, there is a role carved out for him, just not a long-term role, because I don't think the Browns are going to keep him after the 5th year. But that's what I think, how I think these guys and some of the interesting new additions are going to fit into the Browns offense if we look at the Minnesota Vikings offense as the key for that. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think this is how they're going to utilize these guys? Do you think they're going to have a special role carved out just for David Njoku that they just made? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.